If you think you've seen darkness, wait until you see what happens when a man dies in prison. Like, comment, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear, they don't show on TV. The Alabama sun had barely risen when the siren broke through the silence of Holman Correctional Facility. Inside the walls known to House Death Row, chaos always had a familiar rhythm, but that morning something was different. The yard was quiet. Too quiet. And down in cell block E, a man was dead. His name was Marion Red Carter, a 42-year-old inmate serving life without parole for armed robbery and assault. He wasn't famous. He wasn't feared. Just another forgotten name on a roster full of broken lives. But what happened after his death would expose a part of Holman most people never knew existed. The part where the living and the dead were treated almost the same. The coroner's van arrived 2 hours late. The guards didn't rush. In Holman, death wasn't an emergency, it was routine. They rolled Red's body out of the cell, zipped up in a black vinyl bag. Inmates on the tiers stood in silence, their faces hard, emotionless. They'd seen it before. They'd see it again. But one man, inmate Leon Hayes, watched closer than most. He'd spent the last 5 years in the cell across from Red. He knew something was off. Red wasn't sick, he muttered to the guard. He ate dinner last night. He was fine. The guard ignored him, but Leon kept watching as they wheeled the body toward the infirmary. Later that day, word spread fast. No autopsy, no investigation. Just paperwork and a transfer order marked, pending family contact. But Red didn't have any family, at least none that Holman could find. That meant one thing. The body would stay on prison grounds until someone decided otherwise. Holman had a place for men like that, the field behind the chapel where the grass never seemed to grow right. A place inmates called the Yard of Ghosts. But before the burial could happen, a rumor started. Someone said they saw Red's cell cleaned too quickly, everything stripped, scrubbed, and sealed by 10 a.m. Others whispered that a nurse had fainted in the infirmary after seeing Red's face. They said his mouth was open, and something was missing. That night, Leon couldn't sleep. Around midnight, he saw 2 flashlights moving near the chapel. The guards weren't supposed to be out there. He pressed his face to the bars and squinted through the darkness. He could see shapes, 3 men, maybe 4, carrying something wrapped in a tarp. They weren't headed for the morgue. They were going toward the east fence, the one near the old maintenance road that hadn't been used in years. The next morning, the prison chaplain, Reverend McKinley, arrived to prepare for the burial. But when he asked where the body was, no one could answer. The infirmary logbook listed Red as transferred. The warden said the county took him. The county said they never received a call. Somewhere between the cell block and the graveyard, the body of Marion Carter had vanished. That's when everything started to unravel. Reverend McKinley demanded to see the internal reports. The guards refused. He went to the warden's office, locked. By evening, the chaplain was escorted off the grounds for safety reasons. He never came back. Meanwhile, Leon Hayes, the inmate who'd watched it all, was moved to segregation. He told another prisoner that the guards had warned him, "Keep quiet about what you saw, or you'll end up where Carter did." 3 days later, the prison finally announced Carter's death officially. A memo went out, "Inmate Carter Marion L., deceased of natural causes. Remains released to the state." The press didn't question it. No one ever did. But inside Holman, whispers turned to panic. A body disappearing wasn't normal, not even here. Some said it was organ trafficking. Others said it was payback, that Carter had overheard something he shouldn't have. Then came the envelope. 2 weeks after Carter's burial, the warden received a small brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed a dirt patch, fresh, uneven, marked with a crude wooden cross. The photo was taken from inside the prison yard, but not from any angle the guards could reach. Someone from the inside had sent it. Written in black ink on the back were 5 chilling words. "He's not where you think." The warden called for an internal investigation, but it was quietly shut down within hours. No incident report. No press release. Just silence. But the rumor wouldn't die. Inmate Hayes resurfaced months later in a different Alabama facility. When asked about Carter, he told a prison counselor, "They buried the wrong man." No one believed him, until 2023, when a journalist named Amanda Fields, researching forgotten inmate burials, filed a Freedom of Information request. In the records, she found Carter's death certificate, and a shocking discrepancy. The form listed Carter's time of death as 6:40 a.m. But witness statements from that day reported the body being removed at 5:55 a.m. 45 minutes earlier. Meaning either the death was reported late, or Carter was declared dead before he actually was. Amanda's report was never published. She disappeared before it could air. Her notes were found weeks later in a rest stop bathroom near Mobile, soaked from rain. On the last page, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. They buried him alive. The truth about Holman's funerals wasn't about death at all. It was about what happened after. Because in a place where life is treated cheap, death is just another transaction. And sometimes what the state calls burial might just be a way to make a man disappear forever. When the grave behind the chapel was finally dug up months later, what they found inside wasn't a body, but something much, much worse. The Alabama heat was unbearable that morning when the digging began. A correctional work crew had been ordered to clear the overgrown section behind the chapel. No one told them why, but everyone knew what it meant. The Yard of Ghosts was off-limits, a place prisoners avoided even in daylight. The soil there was dry and cracked, stained by years of burials. Every inmate buried in that field had no family to claim them. No funeral, no nameplate, just a wooden cross and a number. But that morning one cross stood out. It was newer, roughly cut. The date carved into the wood didn't match any entry in the logbook. Inmate Marcus Tate, one of the diggers, was the first to notice it. He was serving 20 years for burglary, but in Holman he'd become known as the man who hears things. When his shovel struck something hollow, he froze. "Boss," he called out to the guard overseeing the crew, "I think I hit something." The guard walked over, irritated by the heat, expecting to see another root or rock. But when he knelt down and brushed away the dirt, what he saw made his hands tremble. It wasn't a coffin. It was a wooden box, crudely nailed shut, smaller than regulation size. There were no markings, no number, no name, nothing. The guard ordered the crew back. Within an hour, the area was swarming with officers, cameras, officials. The warden himself stood there, his jaw tight, watching as the box was lifted out of the earth. When they pried it open, a sickening silence fell over the yard. It wasn't a body. Inside was a sealed black folder wrapped in plastic, labeled simply, "Chaplain's Records, 1998. The warden immediately seized it. No one else was allowed to touch it. But word travels fast in prison. By sundown, every inmate on the block was whispering about the discovery, and some were saying that Reverend McKinley's name was inside. That night, the prison went into lockdown. Inside his cell, Marcus couldn't sleep. Around midnight, he heard voices outside his window. 2 guards were arguing near the chapel. One said, "We should have burned it the first time." The other replied, "Orders came from Montgomery. We don't touch nothing now." The next morning, the prison was crawling with state investigators. They took photos, measurements, even soil samples. But when Marcus was taken for his daily work assignment, he saw something strange. The grave they dug up had already been refilled. And the folder? Gone. By afternoon, the warden gathered the staff for a closed-door meeting. He told them the discovery was nothing unusual, just old administrative paperwork. But the tone of his voice betrayed him, tight, defensive, afraid. In the following days, 2 guards were transferred out of Holman without explanation. The prison chaplain's office was sealed. And the inmates who worked that burial crew were quietly relocated to different blocks, all except Marcus. He stayed behind, watching, listening. Then came another twist. 3 days later, Marcus received an envelope through inmate mail. No name, no return address, just his inmate number scribbled on the front. Inside was a folded photograph. The same one the warden received years ago. The same patch of dirt. The same wooden cross. Only this time, scrawled across the bottom were new words. "You dug in the wrong place." Marcus's heart pounded. He knew better than to show anyone. But that night, he hid the photo inside the lining of his mattress. Meanwhile, on the outside, journalist Amanda Fields, who had vanished months earlier, was suddenly back on the radar. A gas station security camera near Mobile captured footage of a woman matching her description, disheveled and frightened, asking for directions to Atmore, the small town near Holman Prison. She never reached it. Her car was later found abandoned just 2 miles from the prison fence, engine still warm. Inside the car were her notebook, recorder, and a Holman visitor's badge, dated just 2 days before the grave was uncovered. Local police took over the case, but within 24 hours, jurisdiction was handed to the state. No reason given. The next morning, every record of Amanda's visit was wiped from Holman's system. Her name no longer appeared in the visitor logs. In the following weeks, strange things started happening inside Holman. The lights in the chapel flickered every night at the same time, 2:37 a.m. Guards said it was faulty wiring. Inmates said otherwise. They claimed they could hear faint humming like a voice trapped behind the walls. Then one evening the new chaplain, a quiet man named Reverend Haskins, went into the chapel alone. He stayed there for almost an hour. When he came out, his hands were trembling. He walked straight to the warden's office muttering, "It's still there, it's all still there." No one ever saw him again. His belongings were cleared from his quarters the next morning. Days later, Marcus was called to the chapel for cleaning duty. He didn't want to go, but refusal meant punishment. When he entered, the air was cold, unnaturally cold. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight cutting across the wooden pews. On the pulpit sat a Bible, open to the book of Ecclesiastes. A single phrase was underlined. "For the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." As he swept near the altar, his broom hit something metal beneath the floorboard. He knelt and pried it up. Beneath the wood was a small square hatch, locked, rusted, and barely visible. He pressed his ear against it and froze. There was a faint sound, like movement. He backed away, shaken, and left the room. But that night he couldn't stop hearing it in his head, that soft, rhythmic thump. Like something alive under the chapel floor. The next morning, guards sealed off the chapel. The official statement said maintenance issues. But word spread they were digging again. By the end of the day, a convoy of black SUVs left Holman under escort. Inside one of them, a covered box. Same size, same shape, same blue tarp. No one spoke about it. The chapel was reopened the following week. And the only record of that day? A single line added to the prison's daily report. Unscheduled excavation completed. No findings. But Marcus knew what he'd heard. He knew something was down there. Something that wasn't supposed to be. The next time the chapel floor was opened years later, it wasn't the state who ordered it. It was the families of the dead inmates, and what they found buried beneath changed Holman's history forever. The sound of shovels scraping against wet dirt echoes through the prison yard. It's 2:13 a.m. and the rain hasn't stopped since they broke ground. The air is thick, part humidity, part fear. Everyone there knows they shouldn't be. The chaplain stands beside the warden, both staring down into the open grave as the guards pull back the final layer of soil. The coffin they uncover looks newer than the others around it. No rust, no decay. A fresh plank of pine, sealed too tight for the time it was supposed to have been buried. The warden signals for it to be opened, his voice low but firm. When the lid lifts, the air changes. It's not the smell of death that hits them, it's what's missing. The coffin is empty. One of the guards steps back, whispering, "That's impossible." The chaplain crosses himself, trembling. He remembers the weight of the coffin when it was carried. He remembers hearing something slide inside. But now, nothing. Just silence and a folded piece of paper where the body should have been. The warden leans in, takes the paper, and reads it under the beam of a flashlight. It's just one sentence. "The dead don't stay buried at Holman." For a moment, nobody moves. The chaplain feels his stomach twist. The journalist, Amanda Fields, who'd been quietly filming from behind a fence, lowers her camera. What she's witnessing isn't supposed to exist. Not in an institution as controlled as Holman. Within hours, the story spreads quietly through the cell blocks. Some inmates whisper that the body walked out on its own. Others claim it was never dead to begin with. But in D Block, Leon Hayes knows more than he lets on. He sits by his bunk, rolling a cigarette, eyes fixed on the cell door. He was the last inmate to see the dead man alive. The man's name was Curtis Dale, a lifer, inmate number 51209. Transferred to Holman 2 years ago after a stabbing at another facility. He'd been kept mostly in solitary confinement, talking to no one except Chaplain McKinley. Curtis told the chaplain he feared someone was trying to make him disappear. Not kill him, but erase him. And then one morning he was gone. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, too many questions and no witnesses. Amanda spends the next day digging through records. The paper trail doesn't add up. The log of Curtis Dale's belongings shows his shoes, his letters, his Bible, but no death certificate. His name still appears in the system as active inmate. When she confronts the warden about it, he ends the interview early. "Some things," he says, "are better left buried." Then he walks out of frame, leaving her recorder still running. That night, the chaplain returns to his quarters to find his journal gone and his room turned upside down. On the wall, scrawled in dust, are 3 words, "Stop the funeral." He tries to report it, but the guards act strange, eyes darting, voices quiet. It's like everyone knows something and no one wants to speak. He finds Amanda again in the chapel pews, her camera on the floor, her eyes red. She shows him what she found on her car windshield, a photo. The same empty coffin. But this time there's a figure standing behind it in the shadows. The outline is unmistakable, Curtis Dale. The next morning the warden orders an all-staff meeting. Every guard, officer and worker gathers in the cafeteria. He announces that the incident in the yard never happened, that the grave was routine maintenance. He forbids further talk of Curtis Dale. Any inmate caught spreading false stories will face disciplinary isolation. But silence doesn't stop the truth. 2 nights later, the power flickers out across the West Wing. Cameras go dark for 7 minutes. When the lights return, the security monitor shows a blurred figure walking across the yard toward the chapel. The timestamp reads 3:03 a.m. The guards rush outside, nothing. No footprints, no signs of movement. Only the chapel door swinging gently open. The chaplain stands in the doorway staring into the dark interior. The candles inside are still lit, though no one had been there all night. On the altar lies his stolen journal, open to the last page. His handwriting but not his words. You can't bury what isn't dead. Amanda's camera catches his face as realization sinks in. He whispers, they made him disappear so no one would find what he knew. The screen fades to black. A few seconds later, audio crackles. A recorded tape, voice distorted but clear enough to understand. They thought the grave would hide him. But the grave was just the beginning. Then silence. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next at Holman was never meant to be seen by the public. The rain had stopped by morning, but Holman felt colder than ever. The air inside the cell blocks was thick, not with noise but with the kind of silence that hides too much truth. Word had already spread about the grave, though the warden's office called it an unauthorized rumor. Guards were ordered to search cells for notes, letters, or recordings connected to the so-called empty coffin. In his quarters, Chaplain McKinley sat at his desk staring at the recovered journal, the same one that had vanished days before. He flipped through the pages looking for what had changed. The handwriting was his, but the ink was darker, the words, different. New lines had been added in the margins. They said he saw the wrong transfer. They said he saw the van. He didn't remember writing it. Meanwhile, Amanda Fields had left Holman the night before and checked into a small motel in Atmore, barely 15 miles away. Sleep didn't come easy. She replayed the footage from the gravesite again and again, pausing at the moment where the paper was found inside the coffin. Frame by frame, she noticed something strange. Before the guard picked up the note, there was already a second hand visible in the shot, gloved, reaching into the coffin. Someone else had been there. The next day, she returned to Holman's visitor lot pretending to follow up on another inmate's story. Her press badge got her inside but not far. A correctional officer, tall, gray uniform, expression unreadable, stopped her at the hallway near the archives. "Miss Fields," he said quietly, "you're asking about something that's above your clearance. Whatever you think you saw, it's not what you think." Then he handed her a folded piece of paper and walked away. She waited until she was back in her car to open it. It was a photocopy of a transfer request form. Inmate number 51209, Curtis Dale. The date was 1 week after his official death. Back in the chapel, the chaplain began piecing together his own clues. He remembered Curtis's last confession. "If I disappear, it won't be death," the inmate had whispered through the grate. "It'll be relocation." He opened the journal again, turning to the back cover. Something stiff was glued under the paper lining. He peeled it back carefully and found a microcassette, marked simply, Holman Day 4. He didn't have a player, but Amanda did. That evening, the two met in the parking lot of an abandoned church off Highway 21. The only light came from Amanda's car headlights. She slipped the cassette into her recorder, pressed play, and a distorted voice began. "This is Curtis Dale. If you're hearing this, I'm not where they said I'd be. They took me through the maintenance tunnel after lights out, under the chapel. There's a truck waiting. They said it's not a funeral, it's extraction." The tape crackled, then ended. Amanda looked up at the chaplain. "Extraction? You think they moved him?" He nodded slowly. "Holman has a tunnel system, built during Reconstruction years ago. Most people don't know it's still usable." Amanda's mind was racing. If what he's saying is true, then they staged his death, to hide him. But hide him from who? McKinley asked. Before either could answer, bright lights flashed behind them, a correctional van pulling into the lot. Amanda shoved the tape back into her bag. The van's headlights caught their faces, Two uniformed men stepped out, expressionless. "Evening, Reverend," one said calmly. "You're far from the chapel tonight." Amanda felt her pulse spike. The other man spoke. "The warden wants to see you both." The ride back to Holman was silent except for the hum of tires. The prison gates opened like jaws, swallowing them into the blue-gray compound. They were escorted to the administration wing, a place few ever entered willingly. Inside, the warden waited behind his desk, the same cold lamp flickering blue light across his face. He gestured for them to sit. "Miss Fields, chaplain, you've both been asking the wrong questions." He leaned forward. "There was no inmate named Curtis Dale transferred here 2 years ago. Check the intake records. You'll find nothing." Amanda frowned. "That's not possible. I have documents." "Forged?" he interrupted smoothly. "Planted. This is what happens when people let stories write themselves." He turned his monitor toward them, a black and white photo of an empty cell. This was his room. Cleaned out months ago. Nobody there. Nobody buried. Just an error that's been corrected. But Amanda caught something on the screen, a detail the warden didn't notice. On the far wall, next to the bed frame, faintly visible under the camera glare, were words scratched into the paint, "Still alive." She didn't react. She couldn't. When they were finally released, the chaplain turned to her and said, "If he's alive, they're keeping him underground. And if that's true, this isn't just a cover-up, it's something organized." That night, Amanda backed up the audio file, the video, and every document she had. But when she tried to upload the footage to her cloud drive, the screen went black. Then a message appeared across the display. "This account has been restricted under federal investigation." Her breath caught. She shut the laptop and stared at the motel window. Outside, the reflection of blue sirens flickered faintly on the curtains. At Holman, deep beneath the chapel, a generator hummed to life. A door opened somewhere underground. And for a brief moment, before it closed again, a voice echoed through the tunnel. "I told you, they never buried me." The audio fades. The screen cuts to black. The chapel at Holman Prison was supposed to be a place of peace. White walls, a cross at the front, wooden pews polished by decades of prayer. But to Chaplain McKinley, it had become a place of silence. A silence too heavy to be holy. For weeks, whispers had traveled through the cell blocks. The inmates called it, the door below. They said at night you could hear footsteps under the chapel floor, not ghosts but men who were supposed to be dead. Amanda Reese, the investigative journalist who had risked her career to expose the funeral cover-ups, met McKinley there just before dawn. The sky outside was iron gray, the air thick with humidity. The guards had no clue what was about to unfold. McKinley's hands trembled as he unlocked the chapel. Inside, the smell of old incense and dust filled the air. The wooden cross hung crooked, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. Amanda pointed her flashlight at the altar. "This is where they did it?" McKinley nodded. "Every one of them. After the funerals, after the press left, this is where they came back." He led her behind the pulpit to a storage area hidden behind faded velvet curtains. A pile of broken hymnals, a mop bucket, and beneath it, a steel plate the size of a grave marker. The chaplain knelt and pulled the plate up. The air that escaped was damp and cold, reeking of soil and rust. A narrow staircase spiraled down into the dark. They descended slowly, flashlights cutting through the dust. Each step echoed in the silence like a heartbeat. At the bottom, a corridor stretched out before them. Rough concrete walls, lined with old prison records and crates stamped property of ADOC restricted. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally into shallow puddles. The atmosphere was claustrophobic, air thick with secrets. "What is this place?" Amanda whispered. "An old execution wing," McKinley said quietly. "They sealed it off after the riots in '93. But someone reopened it." As they walked further, the sound of faint machinery grew louder, a low mechanical hum, coming from behind a locked door marked C-block sublevel. Amanda's pulse quickened. McKinley's eyes darted nervously. "This shouldn't exist," he murmured. Amanda crouched and shone her flashlight on the lock. It was new, too new for a room that had been sealed decades ago. She took a screwdriver from her bag, pried it loose and pushed the door open. Inside was a small room filled with filing cabinets and stacks of videotapes. A single generator powered an old monitor flickering in the corner. McKinley pressed play. The screen came to life, showing grainy footage, inmates in orange uniforms being loaded into caskets, then the same caskets being reopened hours later. The inmates' IDs were switched. The bodies were never cremated. Amanda's hand covered her mouth. "Oh my God," McKinley whispered, "they faked their deaths." The footage continued, a group of guards moving bodies through tunnels, exchanging paperwork and sealing new caskets. A logbook on the table matched dates of recent funerals, with inmate transfers to private facilities. None of it was legal. None of it was supposed to happen. As Amanda flipped through the logbook, one name stopped her cold. Marcus Ellery, the inmate whose funeral she had filmed in Chapter 1. The same man whose casket was carried through the yard, the one the warden claimed was cremated. But next to his name was a single red stamp, active. She turned to McKinley. "He's alive. They buried a body that wasn't his." McKinley stepped back pale. "Then, who did we bury?" The hum from the generator deepened suddenly, followed by a faint metallic clang from deeper in the tunnel. Amanda froze. The sound came again, this time closer. A door shutting. Then silence. She turned off her flashlight and whispered, "Someone else is down here." For a long moment they listened, the sound of breathing, the slow scrape of a boot against concrete. McKinley's voice cracked. "We have to go." But Amanda was already filming, her camera trembling in her hands. The light flickered as she whispered into the mic. "Hidden beneath the chapel of Holman Correctional Facility lies evidence that could unravel one of the darkest secrets in America's prison system." Suddenly, a shadow passed across the far wall, tall, deliberate, human. The faint outline of a man in correctional uniform appeared in the doorway, holding a flashlight that wasn't theirs. Amanda and McKinley ducked behind a cabinet. The beam of light swept across the room. Papers rustled. Then the footsteps stopped right outside their hiding spot. The light lingered, then slowly moved away. The moment stretched for eternity before McKinley whispered, "He knows we're here." Amanda's camera still recorded, shaking. "Then we've got to make it out, before they seal this place again." They crept back toward the staircase, every sound amplified. Behind them, the hum of the generator faded, and the tunnel lights flickered out one by one, as if someone above was cutting the power. When they reached the surface, dawn had broken, but neither spoke a word. The chapel above looked unchanged, as if nothing had ever happened. Yet both knew the truth now lived inside that footage. Proof that not every Holman funeral was a farewell. As Amanda looked back at the cross on the wall, she whispered, "The dead don't always stay buried." The next chapter would decide whether the truth saw daylight, or disappeared into the same silence that swallowed every secret beneath Holman's walls. 3 days after their descent beneath the chapel, the footage Amanda captured was uploaded to a private cloud drive. It was her insurance. Her editor had warned her, "If what you're saying is real, you're exposing more than a prison, you're exposing a system." By that evening she was already being followed. The same silver sedan parked across from her motel 2 nights in a row. The same black SUV behind her on the interstate as she left Atmore. Still, Amanda pressed on, determined to finish what she'd started. The footage from the sublevel showed everything: the coffin swap, the falsified IDs, the warden's coded logbooks. It also showed the figure who found them in the tunnels. His face briefly caught in the light before the camera cut. McKinley identified him. Deputy Warden Hayes, a man who had worked at Holman for over 20 years and oversaw every inmate transfer. Amanda's plan was simple, or so she thought. Deliver the footage to her editor, go public, and let the truth burn its way through the news cycle. But Holman had other plans. McKinley called her the next morning, his voice trembling. "They know we were down there," he said. "Hayes came to see me. He said the footage was a security breach. He wants the copy." Amanda's pulse quickened. "He won't find it," she said. "It's encrypted. Only my editor can access it." McKinley paused. "Amanda, he knew about your motel." The call ended abruptly. That same night, Amanda returned to Holman, one last time. She needed confirmation. She needed proof that Marcus Ellery, the inmate who was supposed to be dead, was still alive. If she could film him, she could expose the entire cover-up. She parked a mile from the prison's perimeter fence, the rain falling in sheets across the empty highway. Her camera light blinked faintly in the dark. Through the fence, Holman stood like a fortress, blue-gray concrete, endless razor wire, and the faint hum of floodlights. She crept along the outer wall, following the narrow service road that led toward the chapel. But the moment she reached the back gate, she froze. A voice cut through the rain, "You shouldn't have come back." Deputy Warden Hayes stood by the chapel door, umbrella in hand, face unreadable. His uniform was soaked, his badge glinting faintly. "You got what you wanted," he said quietly. "Why keep digging?" Amanda steadied her camera. "Because the public deserves to know." Hayes took a slow breath, stepping closer. You think this place is evil. But you don't understand, Holman doesn't bury the dead. It buries secrets. You expose this and it's not just me who goes down. You'll be next. Before Amanda could respond, the chapel lights flickered. Hayes turned toward the door as if hearing something. Then, a faint metallic echo beneath the floorboards. Amanda's eyes widened. The sound came again, rhythmic, deliberate. Knocking. From below. Hayes looked at her, panic breaking through his calm. No one's supposed to be down there, he whispered. Amanda pushed past him and ran inside, camera shaking as she retraced her path to the pulpit. The steel plate was half open, as if someone else had already gone below. She turned on her flashlight and descended again, heart pounding. The sublevel was darker this time. The generator was gone, power completely cut. Only her beam of light pierced the void. The air was colder, heavier. Every step echoed through the tunnel like a warning. When she reached the chamber, the cabinets were empty. The tapes, the logbooks, all gone. Only a single object remained on the table, a microcassette labeled Holman, Day 5. Amanda picked it up, slipped it into her recorder and pressed play. The voice that came through was shaky, familiar. Chaplain McKinley. If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out. They're moving the inmates through the old transfer line. Ellery's alive, but they're taking him to Redwater Facility tonight. This goes deeper than Holman. They've been doing it for years. Static. Then, faintly, another voice in the background, end it. Now. Followed by a loud click. Amanda froze, hand trembling over the recorder. McKinley was gone. She knew it. But his voice had given her the one thing Holman had spent decades burying, proof. When she emerged from the chapel, dawn was breaking over the yard. The rain had stopped. Hayes was gone. In his place, 2 patrol cars idled by the main gate. A guard approached, clipboard in hand, pretending not to notice her camera. Amanda slipped into her car and drove away, tires splashing through puddles. She didn't stop until she reached the state line. That afternoon, she sent the microcassette to her editor. Encrypted, untitled, labeled only, for release if I disappear. 3 weeks later, the file was leaked online by an anonymous source. The video, titled The Holman Tapes, received over 1.2 million views in 48 hours before being removed for security review. But by then the truth had already spread. Independent journalists mirrored the file, podcasts dissected every second, and the Department of Corrections issued a quiet statement claiming the footage was digitally manipulated. A month later, construction began to demolish Holman's old chapel. Official reason: structural decay. In the rubble, one object was found by a cleanup worker, a small digital camera, cracked but intact. Inside it was the final recording Amanda ever made. The video showed the chapel interior, empty and dim. Her voice whispered, "The dead don't rest here. They wait." The camera panned down toward the steel plate. A faint knocking echoed once, twice, then silence. The video cut out. The screen faded to black. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe before the next secret gets buried.